Assalamu alaikum everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Medical Talk. Today we have with us Dr. Anum Daniyal Saleem, who is an internal medicine resident at the Bassett Medical Center in New York. And I'm very honored to have her here today with us. A lot of you would know her from her blog on Instagram, which is very helpful for a lot of medical students and for people who are applying for residency in the US. So I'm very honored to have her here today with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Anum.
Thank you so much, Anusha, for having me here.
Thank you. I would like to start by talking a bit about your early life. Where were you born and raised, and what was your early education like?
So I'm originally from Karachi, Pakistan. So I was born and raised in Karachi, Pakistan. My initial education, I was actually a good student until my primary, and then I ended up getting promoted from grade 8 to grade 10th. So there was a point where I missed grade 9th, and then it was a little bit of a hiccup, and then I think I was not really so well mentally at that point because of the big change. And that is something that I really want to mention, that when I was doing my O levels and A levels, I did not have best grades. And like the perception that we have that you need to be an exceptionally amazing student, or you have to have like straight A's or A stars to get into a med school, which is kind of true that it is highly competitive, but it's not the end of the world if you're not scoring that well. You should always try hard, strive harder. So I did not do that well actually in my A levels at all, to a point where getting into a med school was quite a bit of an effort. Your grades, your journey till med school kind of does not define you, and anything. I think your grades really don't define you. What defines you is how much hard work you're ready to put in.
I think that's very important that you mentioned this, because I feel like back in A levels and O levels, the studying style was very different from the kind of studies we have in med school. I'm in second year right now, so it's completely different. Even people who struggled back in O levels are doing much better than people who scored very high in A levels or O levels, because it's a completely different kind of education that we are receiving in medical schools. It's more hands-on, and you need to build more concepts. So I think it's very different.
Yeah, and it's actually all about how much you're willing to put in. So if you're actually making some effort in med school, you definitely will do better than a lot of other students. The other thing is that what we really do in OA levels kind of this does build our foundation, but I think when you're starting med school, it's a good idea to kind of just refresh all your basics and then build on them. So regardless of the fact what kind of student you were before, it doesn't really dictate anything.
So why did you decide to do medicine, and what was your medical school experience like?
So I kind of knew since the beginning that I want to do medicine because my siblings are doctors. So it was kind of like, just given that I'm going to be a doctor. I did not really explore anything else in my life. So it was very clear for me since the beginning. My medical school experience, like I said, that it was a little hard for me to get into med school because I did not do that great in OA levels for multiple reasons. I did not get into one of the best med schools. And, at that time, I think that it concerns a lot of people, especially medical students and their parents, about what kind of med school their child is getting into. And I do understand that there is like government versus private medical schools, and there is a lot of financial role. There's a lot of finances that are a part of this discussion. But at the end, the kind of medical school that you're in does not really matter if your overall CV and your overall efforts are good enough. So I think that would be one thing that I would really like to mention, that if you're not getting into like one of the best medical schools, or you're not getting into Khan or Dow or something that you really dreamt of, and you're going into a private medical school, that do not take that to your heart, and do not have that be a hindrance to your journey. It's just a starting point. There are a lot of things that you can work on. And then it does not define you. Your medical school, yes, does play a role, but it is not the only deciding factor. There are so many other factors, and more than the medical school, it's the individual. So I got into Ziauddin at that point. I did hear from a couple of people that it wasn't really the best medical school. but I knew that's where I wanted to go. I had my reasons. My friends were going to the same medical school, and I think at that point for my mental health that I wasn't doing so great mentally, which I realized like when I look back now, because I was an 18-year-old kid, to be honest. But when I think about it, I wasn't doing, there was a lot of stress, there was a lot of personal reasons that I wasn't doing so well. So now when I think about it, I think it was a really good decision for me to go to the med school where all my friends were going, where I had a support system rather than, listening to people who just criticize everything, and then, they kind of judge you on the kind of med school you're from, the kind of grades you're getting into. It's about you, what you feel comfortable with. So I decided to go where all my friends were going, and I think that over there the kind of support system I had did help me to progress and achieve things that were ultimately needed. So that would be one thing that I would really wanted to get across, especially for medical students who worry about, if they're going to get into that dream med school or not.
I feel like when you're in that zone, when you're just out of A levels and then you're taking the MCAT, it's very difficult for people to understand this. 2 years ago, when I was in that phase, if someone would have told me, it's all right if you don't get into your dream med school, तो उस वक्त मुझे शायद इतनी समझ नहीं आती. But now, when I am a second year student and I know the kind of opportunities I can make for myself and the kind of avenues that my medical school is providing me with, तो मुझे समझ आती है कि it's all right if even if you don't get into a very amazing medical school जिसको सुन के सब लोग वाओ बोलना शुरू कर दें. So I mean, it's all right. You can always make your own path.
Yeah, and then things can really get to your head. Honestly, even when I was interviewing here, I had like Pakistan only like asking me from which med school I'm in, and honestly, like the programs didn't care, but my co interns and like co used to care a lot. And then I just realized that it's just people in our country who really care about it, because it's kind of a competition. Um, but in the real world, it doesn't really matter if you're good enough on your own.
I think one thing that a lot of people don't really talk about when they're moving to the US for residency is that you're leaving a lot of people behind. You're leaving your parents, your family, your friends, your entire life back in Pakistan. So, what was your journey like when you were moving to the US? Do you have any advice for people who are struggling and going through that phase right now?
So to be honest, I kind of knew what life in US looked like, because both of my brother were residents here, so I spent a lot of time with them over here. So I kind of understood that the life is very different, especially a life of a resident is very different to the kind of life that we are used to in Pakistan. And I wasn't a big fan of, moving to states, but it was what was in my destiny, so I did. The initial few years were really, really hard for me because I did match into a relatively remote area. I moved here in the middle of the pandemic, so I was a very social person. I had a lot of hobbies when I was back in Pakistan, but as soon as I came here, there was lockdown, there was residency, and then my area being so remote, like there was everything used to shut down at 6 p.m. and it still does, and then it's dark at 4:30 p.m. So it's a lot of change, which we think is very petty and very minute when we're like looking at the overall picture. But when you get here, you do realize that all of these things are not that minute. It's a complete cultural shock. Everything kind of changes. For me, that what worked was that you do need to realize in the initial years that this is home. Because for me, it was really hard to let go of Karachi being home for me and Pakistan being home for me, which it always will be. But you do need to like relate where you're living as your home. So the sooner you kind of just accept and digest that, it's going to help you. You also need to realize that your life is going to change completely, and holding on to your previous life is going to make it more difficult. Other than that, I think you should have a good support system. What helped me was that I eventually had all my friends move here, so that is really good that I get to see my friends more frequently now. So that is something that really does impact positive But what I was saying is that, having a good support system is very important, and you realizing that life is going to be completely different. And then making active efforts. Like, sometimes when I moved in here, I was like kind of just so stuck onto my old life that I was not making active efforts to make new friends because I was just so homesick and I was just missing my old life so much. But you do need to socialize, you do need to like get out, make friends. It's not necessary that you're going to find the same kind of people that you did back home, but you do make some good relationships. And I think that's the key to like surviving during residency in a country that's like completely foreign for you.
You've talked about this on your blog as well, and it's very helpful. I've been reading all of those posts, and I feel like you just need to adapt and realize that you have to move on in a certain way and adapt to the new lifestyle over there. I think it's very different from the kind of lifestyle we have in Pakistan.
It is. And eventually you're gonna start liking it. Like, I never thought that I'm gonna like it, but I now, my residency, I'm not an intern anymore, so my hours have gotten better. My husband's not a resident anymore, so his hours have gotten better. We get more time to spend. So like residency, especially intern year, is like it's brutal. So once you get out, you do need to realize that this is not going to be forever for you. It's really hard to like kind of like, it's very easy to say that, don't cling onto your old life. It's in reality it's kind of very different, especially if you are someone who is not really excited about it. Like, I know there are people who dream to be come here, match here, and then live their life over here. If you're someone who's like, somewhat just so about it, you will have a time. And then kind of acknowledging that and not being so hard on yourself um, is what I can honestly suggest at this point.
What was your match experience like, and what were some of the hurdles that you faced during that time?
So my match season was actually the last season when there were in-person interviews, and then we went like all virtual. Initially, when I applied for match, I did not get any interviews until mid-November, maybe one or two. And then it was kind of very stressful for me at that point. But then there was a patch in November where I got like a bunch of interviews at that point. Like in 15 days, I got quite a bit. And then I didn't get any until like end of December. So while there were other friends who were getting interviews, like, within a week of the season starting, and then they were intermittently getting it. So comparing your journey is something that did put me into a lot of stress at that point. um I cannot any such hurdles in my journey. But then a few things that I think I would want to change is reaching out to more people, to more alumni, to your relatives, friends, anyone that you kind of know. I know that when we're doing that, we kind of just feel a little hesitant. But there's this one thing that, I really use in my life now, is that always ask. Like, there's nothing wrong in asking. Like, if you want a day off, ask. If you want a favor, ask. What's going to be the worst thing? They're gonna say no, or they're not gonna do. You're not losing anything. But if somebody says yes or agrees to do that for you, it really matters. So just never hesitate to ask, and you really, really increase your chances of pulling more interviews in, which does increase your chances eventually. I know that there are a lot of people who ask for recommendations, and you might not. I mean, there are people I don't reply to because there are like hundreds of requests that I get on my blog, especially. So that's okay. If people are not replying you, I don't think you should take that personally, because you need to understand that if you are reaching to a resident or an intern, they have a pool of their own problems. But as long as somebody is getting back to you, putting a word in for you, is something that would really, really change your chances of matching.
A lot of people have said this, that for every 100 emails you send, at least 2 to 3 people will respond to you and will help you. So there's no harm in asking.
Exactly. I mean, what's the worst case scenario? They're not gonna reply you, or probably they're gonna say like, "Oh, usne mera dimag kharab kiya hua hai," but like, who cares, honestly? But that's how you're gonna get to places. And once you are in that position, obviously you're gonna give that back to your juniors, and look at it that way, that if someone was reaching out to you, you wouldn't care. You would just be willing to help, right? So people do help as much as they can. comparing yourself to others is one of the worst things that you can do in your life. Even when you're a resident, comparing your progress to your other co-interns or co-residents, it's a recipe for disaster because everybody has a different learning curve, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the same, or it doesn't define anything. So if you're comparing yourself, the only thing it brings to you is stress, because there's always going to be somebody who knows more than you, who has more interviews than you, who's scoring better than you, who's in a better program, who's in a better med school. It's always going to be the case. You cannot always be the best, right? So it just brings you stress. So stop comparing. Also, match is it is hard work, it is effort, but a major chunk of it is luck. So there are people I know who did not match with 15 interviews, and then there are people who match with 2 interviews. I know people match with 1 interview. So, it's kind of sounds impossible, but it does happen. So just keep your faith strong, just keep praying, believe in yourself, give your best shot, and that's all you can do. If you're not getting interviews, you stressing over it is not going to get interviews, right?
That's very good advice. I think it's very difficult to realize, but I think when people like you explain all of this and have gone through the journey, I think it's very helpful.
One thing that like really, really helped me through my journey was that I never used to like listen to other people and their journey. I mean, it's not easy to like completely ignore people and not compare. So there was a defense mechanism when I stopped talking about my journey with other people. Like, I would like very openly tell them that, I do not want to discuss this. I come out to have a good time, to de-stress. So I do not want to talk about steps, or I do not want to talk about medicine. If you're going to go out to have a good time and all you're discussing is your step scores or how much you scored in UWorld, and you're scoring 60 and your friend is scoring 80, you will compare yourself. There's like no way. And then you just draw that line and you just openly communicate. There's like nothing to be ashamed of. It's just taking care of your own mental peace.
That's a very good way to, I think, not compare yourself to others. I think it's very important to separate your work and your medical school from other things in your life, because if you're always talking about it, then it will get to your head.
Kind of community that we come from, if you're not talking something, it's just assumed that we are hiding stuff. Like, I don't think have that understanding that we're not talking about a few things, because it just makes us feel uncomfortable. It has nothing to do with us hiding, like we don't want ki nazar lag jaye, we don't want to like show what we're doing. It's not that. It's just sometimes it just brings on a lot of anxiety for us, which we're not up for. So if you're not talking to you about something, it doesn't have to do anything with you. It's about us. So I think that we as a community, especially like our Desi community, really needs to understand and respect those boundaries. That if somebody is not talking about something, it's okay. And if you are in that position where you don't want to talk about something, I think you should be completely honest. Just say, I don't want to talk about it. And I don't think anybody is going to like probe you to talk about it any further.
So when did you start preparing for the step 1 exam when you were in medical school? And what do you think is the best time to start preparing for it now that it is pass and fail? A lot of people think that it's better to get done with it earlier on because it's pass and fail now, and focus more on step 2 that has a score attached to it.
Yeah, that's right. When we had a score attached to it, I still started in my 3rd year, and it took me 2 years to do it with my med school. It also depends on the kind of approach you have and your pace eventually. But now that it's just pass and fail, I think spending so much time on step 1 is not that important. You should rather just be comfortable where you know that you are going to pass the exam, and then move on to step 2. Step 2, I believe, is easier to score on, and it would definitely have more weightage. And I think that given that it's pass and fail, you should work on other things so that you can add that to your CV. So when there was a score, it was kind of like, differentiating between candidates, and programs were using that to rank candidates. But now, since it's just everybody is on the same level, you should probably add more things to your CV, like volunteer work, research work. So if this was us like 2 or 3 years ago, and somebody would have asked me if we should do observerships or research work, or should we just study for steps, I would have been like, study for steps, just make sure you get a score. But now things have changed, and I think the way your CV looks will play a major part in your ranking.
Moving on from that, I think a lot of medical students and residents at some point in their lives, they do face burnout and they find it difficult to maintain a work-life balance. So how do you approach that?
So I think you need to first identify your signs of burnout, and sometimes you just know, like you just know in your self that you're moving towards burnout, and then at that time taking a break and de-stressing yourself is really important. If you are like still studying for steps, I think the best way that you can do is just consider taking a break completely. And by completely, I mean that you're not even supposed to talk about it. Like if you're not studying but you're going out and talking to people who are studying, or if you're going to a very highly stimulating environment, it is not going to help you. You either need to on your own. There were days when I was doing my step one that I would literally just lock myself in the room, watch movies, order in food, and not see people for 24 hours. And I would tell them that I need this for myself. It's just that something I'm doing for my own self. Because I knew if I'm going to go out, everybody and anybody is going to be asking me, oh, exam ki tayari kaisi chal rahi hai? And I didn't want to answer all of those kind of questions. So you can like take time to yourself, or go out on a drive, meet people who are like not from medicine, or even if you want to meet friends who you're really close to, just pick one thing that really does help de-stress you. Things are a little different when you're an intern or a resident. You cannot necessarily take off from work because it's kind of like just very important for you to go there, show up, learn stuff. But if there is a point in life where you do feel that you cannot do it anymore, in residency every other day you're going to feel like you cannot do it anymore. So I'm not saying take a break every day, but if when it gets too much, you definitely need to talk to your program about it. So for us, especially for IMGs, residency plus being away from home does take a toll on you. So do recognize those signs and seek help if it's needed, because there's like no shame in seeking help, because sometimes the kind of difference seeking help makes you kind of underestimate it. So it does really help when you go out, you take medical help, or psychiatric help, or even emotional help. It does really help you. It's just that you need to take that step.
I think it's very important, as you mentioned, to recognize that point where you're starting to burn out and take a break. When we're talking about residency and medical school, a lot of people, when they enter medical school, especially first and second year medical students who plan on doing the USMLE, what is your advice to them when they're in the first 2-3 years of medical school?
I think the first 2 years of medical school, just try to focus on your med school. Okay, like you need to also enjoy your life. So I think it's too premature at that time. I think at that time you just need to figure out that which way are you headed. Like, do you want to go to US, do you want to go to Australia, do you want to go to Middle East, stay back in Pakistan? Just explore those options, discuss it with your family, with your friends. Just decide that. You don't necessarily have to dive in and just like pick your first aid or your Kaplan and start studying. You really need to like ease in initially. The first initial 6 months of residence of medical school, I think you just need to like just absorb med school, find your kind of people, kind of understand how it works, at least give a couple of modules to understand which books you are going to study from. I think my first year of med school was like spent deciding that mujhe padhna kin kitabon se hai. Like, do I want to like go through those huge books, or am I going to do like short books? Or so you just, for the first year, it's just going to be that. You can on the side always explore what you want to do, and then I think when you're in third year, all those decisions, all the base that you have kind of all the foundation that you have built is very important for you to make a decision and move on in third year. So the first 2 years, I would say, relatively just take it easy.
Yeah, I think in first year, it takes a lot of time to recognize the kind of books you want to use or the kind of study method you want to adopt, because medical school is completely different from what you studied in A levels and O levels. As a female physician coming from Pakistan, there is a lot of issue when it comes to female doctors who want to practice, and they find it very difficult because there's still a stigma attached to this term called Dr. Bahu, where a lot of people expect female physicians to stop working after they get married. Have you seen such situations around you, and how do you think that we can tackle such issues?
So, if you follow my blog, you would know that this is one of my favorite topics. But I think before I start to like talk about this, I'm very big on autonomy, and I'm very big on choice. So, a few experiences where there are females who have pursued medicine, and in the end, they decide not to practice medicine on their own choice. Now, that is completely different. I've seen people shaming those women who decide to pursue medicine and then not practice it. And I think that that is their own choice. If they're doing it because they just don't want to do it, they just feel it's too much for them, or they enjoy taking care of their kids, or they enjoy staying at home, or maybe they enjoy an alternate career. It's completely up to them. So shaming them is something that I'm not really very fond of. I do understand that if you're, going to medical school, it's kind of your responsibility to serve humanity. But at the same time, all those women who got a seat in a medical school worked hard enough for it. They were not sitting at home and watching movies when they were just awarded with that seat. They did work, they did score, and if you wanted to score that seat, you could have probably worked harder than them, right? Or you could probably have been luckier than them. If you were not, you have no right to shame someone for coming down to people, to females who are forced not to practice. I think it is a very no-go kind of a situation for me, because I think people who are not into medicine do not realize the kind of effort we put in, the kind of sacrifices that every individual gives to reach to a certain point in their life where they even have the option and opportunity to practice medicine. It is not awarded to you while you're sleeping in your bed or while you're painting your nails. It's, and especially for women, I think it's much harder because we have to break some basic stereotypes, and we also have to, we also have a more we also have like more difficult situations to go through, especially the entire Rishta situation that majority of Pakistani women have to undergo. So the Dr. Bahu concept, I think that you should be, if you're into an arranged marriage, if you're getting into that, I think you should be very open about it. I think the key for a successful life is being very honest and very open with your thoughts. Maybe some people will think you're too much, but those are not the right kind of people that you want in your life. If somebody thinks you're too blunt, or you're um too blunt, or too much in the face, or too much as a woman, I think kind of people in your life, because you will not be able to keep up with them. At the end of the day, if you have to spend a lifetime with them, it's not going to work. It is going to work out with you compromising your entire life. So if you're into an arranged marriage setting, you do need to communicate that. If you are into a situation where you like someone or you're seeing someone, I think you really need to sit down with yourself and decide what's important for you. There are going to be people for whom career is going to be much more important, and it's going to bring much more happiness to them than their personal life. And there are going to be people who want to have a much better personal life, or much better is not even the right word, who are like more inclined towards having the kind of life that they wanted. So you need to decide, like, and it's not always like a very black and white kind of a decision. You really need to weigh your pros and cons. And I also believe that if you're in a situation where somebody is giving you a choice, putting you in a situation where you have to choose them or something else, it's not worth it. Because it's not necessary that this is the only time that you're going to be in that situation. There are going to be multiple times that you're going to be thrown into that situations, and one can just take it a few times. You cannot just deal with it all your life. Dr. Bahu concept, I just really need to talk to people. And I really want to like meet those people. I have met quite a few. But I just really want to talk to those people and understand that why. Like, if you want someone who stays at home, kind of serves you, serves your family, and that is what you're looking for, then why a doctor? Like, if you want an educated wife, there are so many other people who are like equally or even more educated. And there are people educated enough and they don't want to do anything. Go for those people. So, these are the kind of situations that I think I have seen, I have experienced, and being like completely brutally honest in your life at a stage where you have the options to choose is much better than diving into something and then realizing that you're just killing your own wishes, and you are not prioritizing yourself. It's just going to be a recipe for disaster. So yeah, that's my take on that.
I think you need to be very open with the other person, whoever you're talking to, because at some point it will put you in a very difficult situation if you have to choose. And as you mentioned, the kind of effort we're putting into medicine, just studying every single day, spending so many hours in the university or later on in the hospital, I think everyone should have the option of choosing what they really want to do with this degree.
Exactly. And it goes the same way for the person who's on the other end of the table. Like, it's not easy to have a spouse who's in medicine. Like, my husband is a doctor himself. He was in residency while I was in residency. So he kind of understood. But there were times where he would also just be frustrated at the situation that, we're working all the time. If he's free, I'm not available. But he did understand that to a point because he was coming from there. There are people who are in medicine, but they do not understand that for their partner. And just like a couple of days ago, another friend of mine was like, looking into a rishta situation. Girl was a physician, and then he himself was not a physician. And I did talk to him that, I think you don't realize that, but a person who is in residency is on call every third day. They're going to be not home for like 24 hours in a stretch. The time they're home, they're likely going to be sleeping. They're not going to bring ton of money at home, considering if they're practicing in Pakistan. Most of the time, they probably are going to look homeless because that's how tired they're going to be. So if you are looking for a wife who's going to be available for you, for your kids, for your family, for your other activities like going out, traveling, I'm not saying that a doctor's not available to do that at all. But there are some limitations to that. So if you are understanding towards those limitations, it's just going to be easier for you and for the other person that you're getting married to.
Yeah, I think it's very important if someone is not in medicine to really understand the kind of lifestyle that residents or physicians have.
Exactly, because there's a lot of stress. You're contributing a lot to medicine, you're sacrificing a lot for medicine. And on top of that, if you come back home to a sour spouse, I think that is going to be probably the worst thing that you can probably even imagine. So, I think women need to be like more open about it. Like, I know that there are a lot of families and a lot of especially a lot of Desi families who are not very fond of their bahus or their daughters or their wives working. That's okay. I mean, if they don't want it, they don't want it. But if you want it, you need to be very clear about it. That I want it. My parents spent money on this, or I spent money on this, or I spent energy on this, and I don't want to make that kind of compromise. And if you don't want to keep up with me, then it's your loss. I'm gonna find someone else, and I hope you find someone else too. So just speak your mind rather than just saying, okay, maybe that person's going to change their mind, aage, or situations are going to improve. If you feel that someone is not as liberal or not as conservative as you are, then I don't think you should be wasting your time, because it's not like a 2-year commitment. It's like you're looking at a lifetime.
Those are some very important things that you mentioned here. And I really hope that people listening to this try to make the right decisions for themselves, because studying for so long, spending so much money and energy and time on something, and then being in a situation where you're not allowed to work and not allowed to do what you really love doing is a very sad situation. And I really hope that no one goes through that.
If I had to sit back and not do what I wanted to love eventually, if I did not want to get the reward of all my hard work, why did I even work so hard? I could have been like, hanging out, going to parties, going to dawats. Like, I sacrificed all of that in my teenage years. I was not there at my best friend's wedding. I was not there. I was not able to contribute to my cousin's wedding. I was not able to go to this vacation with my family. All of these were like important memories that I sacrificed
Yeah.
and for the reward that I was eventually aiming to get. And
Yeah.
if I'm not going to get that, then why did I do that? So, as someone who did not want to from the beginning, like they were very clear, okay, like mujhe itni mehnat karni nahi hai, I don't want to do medicine, I'm going to do something else. Then go for those people. Your thoughts, your ideas kind of align with them.
I really hope things get better in the future for female physicians, especially. Now that you're a resident and you're about to complete your residency, inshallah, how do you think medicine will be 50 years from now? Do you see some major changes happening?
It's hard for me to comment on that, but definitely like we are progressing as overall. There is going to be a lot of technology, and like we already know that 50 years back we did not have EMR, we were like paper charts, so a lot of things have changed. Moving forward, I think something that I really hope changes is for female physicians. Even right now, even in the States, there's a lot of disparity between male and female physicians that we're not aware of. But one thing that I would want to see change, and one thing that I would advocate about, is the role of female physicians and the value of female physicians in medicine. Even at this point, a female physician is paid $2 million less than a male physician throughout her career, which I think is absolutely, absurd. So that is something that I be working on after I graduate from residency. And that is what I am more interested in, since we have, improved so much compared to like the times where there was like so much. I think there is still a lot of disparity and gender and race and inequity, but I hope that that kind of changes with time.
That's really shocking. The numbers you just mentioned. I think a lot of people here in Pakistan think that maybe it's better in the US and not as bad as it is in Pakistan. But I really hope that things change in the future.
It is a little better over here, definitely, but it's still there. And then there has not been a lot of progress in the past 20 years from what I have seen. There are very less women in leadership. There are very less women in administrative faculty. Even like as program directors or chief of medicine, women are not usually promoted to that level. The kind of, even like all of whatever I'm saying is very research based, because I'm really interested in this. So even like the way female physicians are evaluated is very different from how male residents and male medical students are evaluated. So there's still a lot of stuff even in US which we back home don't think there is, but it's high time that we kind of change the narrative for ourselves.
Yeah, I really hope that it changes in the future and things get better for female physicians, especially. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Anum. I think that brings us to the end of our conversation. It was an honor talking to you. I've been following your journey through your Instagram blog since the past few years, and it is an honor talking to you over here. And I really hope that we can have you on the podcast soon. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much for having me here. It was lovely talking to you and getting to know you, of course. And if there's anything in the future that you or your friends or people from your med school need help with, I am here to help. My husband has more time now, and he's like really big on helping his junior. I think that is going to be really great for you guys. I do plan to like work more on Mashed and Married eventually once I graduate from residency. So I hope that that platform kind of helps more people.
Thank you.